Hi, Patty Simone here, and we are talking to Adrian. He just gave a talk at Real-Time New York, and he's from RadioShack, and he's also been on the entrepreneurial side. So he has a real feel for what the big boys are doing, how that can be implemented on the small business side. So Adrian, thanks for talking.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm just excited to be here at the Real-Time conference, and also I just learned that, talking about the entrepreneurial experience and how that merges and intersects with the digital marketing. I think digital provides a ton of learnings and opportunities for looking forward to kind of sharing my knowledge and also learning from the other attendees as well.
What did you cover? I know you're not going to go do the whole thing, but what are the top tips that you can, takeaways that you can give people, and also maybe some trends that you might see that are emerging?
I'd say at RadioShack, we've been able to really leverage, obviously you think big brands, you think big budgets. So we spend millions of dollars a year on paid media to interact with our consumers, to target them, and really kind of integrate with them. But I think for entrepreneur, there are lots of free tools or low-cost tools that you could use, such as Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. All have, free pages that you could do. In addition to that, I'd also recommend doing some of the free or low-cost listening tools, like a Trendr, TRENDRR, is a great tool for measuring sentiment across social space. Socialmention.com is also a website we use to just get a really high-level glance of how you're trending online. So using some of these free tools, you can leverage those to be smarter about your brand and also about your personal brand as well. LinkedIn is a great way to have connections and get referrals and leads as well. So I think there's a ton of free tools or even blogger platforms that you could use to really start your business. And from there, you can learn which one to target based on how you grow.
If you're talking from an entrepreneurial standpoint, what do you think you would recommend for someone to say, spend X amount of time devoted to or checking out and listening in the social media space versus what they're doing with other spaces? And then, again, integration is still, of course, is key. But what would you recommend?
Well, I actually share my own personal experience. So before starting as social media director at RadioShack over a year and a half ago, I spent 3 years on the kind of agency side. I was leading up a digital firm in terms of brand development and advertising for retailers. And what I learned specifically was you got to shut up and listen. So I actually listened for an entire year when I started my position at RadioShack. So taking my experience as an entrepreneur, you got to start with research to develop a strategy and objectives before you can recommend to a client the proper proposal or the proper elements to their solution. So for me, I spent literally a year, we did listening and learning and testing, but a lot of it was just really understanding the space, understanding the consumer, so you can have a credible conversation with them. The worst thing you could do, I think, is jump the gun and really kind of jump in and try to own the space. So I'd say when you start in these platforms, Facebook, Twitter, or whatever the channel is, start and just listen, participate, retweet on Twitter, respond to comments and things like that. But you don't really have to be aggressive. Just kind of let the consumer own the conversation. You just be a participant. I think that's been the best advice we've taken at RadioShack, and I took that in my own personal career as well.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because so many people in my world, especially in startups, and they don't have a lot of funds, they're impatient.
Yes.
They're very impatient. They want something that's going to happen right away, and they, especially from even just the costing side, when you tell them, okay, part of this has to be that we talk and then we listen, and then I can come up with whatever the right plan is for you. But beforehand, I just can't say, hey, you should do this without knowing what's going on.
Yeah. And that's always been a challenge. I think a lot of your clients, if you're B2B or B2C, a lot of internal clients, for me at RadioShack, they want results yesterday, and you have to prove your value and prove your worth. And you really got to do a lot of work to get the investment. So even on the entrepreneur side, you got to do a lot of work and invest a lot of time to get the funding or to get the buy-in or the approvals for a lot of these projects. So a lot of that, you really do have to invest a lot of time in making sure that your own personal brand looks good online as well, making sure that your persona is professional, and also that you're doing good work. So a lot of it is if you have good thoughts and work and things you're doing, share that on a blog, share that via Twitter and Facebook, share some of that content, and that's low cost, but it positions you as an expert online as well. For RadioShack, we want to be perceived as a consumer electronics retailer that helps you get technology right. So we share videos and tips on how to get more out of your products. That may necessarily lead to a direct sale for us, but that might make you, think about us as top of mind when you're in the product purchase life cycle, and then from there you purchase later. So don't always look for that transactional kind of return on investment. Look at it as building a relationship with a consumer by offering value to them.
Would you consider RadioShack an early adapter because of what they're doing and because of their methodology of, like you said, sharing quality information in order to not make their numbers this month, but thinking long term?
Yeah. I mean, it's always been our goal to be an innovator in the space. We're a 90-year-old iconic brand. Most of consumers are familiar with our brand, but a lot of people don't know that we sell cell phones, we sell iPad 2s, we sell some of the latest cutting-edge technology. So for us, what better way to underline our innovation status than to participate in Foursquare campaigns? What I talked about on the panel earlier today was our location-based applications and some of the cool things we're launching with partners with Google and things like that. Let's test and learn in the space. And so we've been able to really use those to our advantage to be an early adopter. And we've had I could have whole talk about campaigns that have failed for us, right? So there's things that we didn't do right, but we quickly learned from them. We adopted new technologies and approaches, and we're able to leverage those to succeed.
That's a very critical point, that a lot of people are afraid of even trying something because they're afraid of failure, but meanwhile failure sometimes leads to innovation.
Yeah, I'd say the failure factor is a requirement to any long-term success. You gotta learn what you don't know before you learn what you're strong at. And so even for me in my personal kind of career as an entrepreneur, there are a ton of things you could do, but you got to hone in on what you could own. And so for RadioShack, we tried a good number of different platforms and technology angles that didn't work for us. So then we kind of recalibrate. I think, but in the end, the one theme that you always have to use as a guide point is, what does your consumer want and what are your objectives? From there, it all lines up to there. I'd say I think the biggest failures are when we try to do something that's what's cool or what's trendy or what's just a buzz point. Don't go based on the buzz. Go based on your consumer and let them guide your direction in terms of where you want to be and how you want to approach it.
Excellent advice. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.